This is an actual account of the worst race riot in United States history. It's not a pretty story, and it's not being told for its shock value or to reopen old wounds. This material is presented because it happened 70 years ago to another generation whose story is pertinent to this contemporary generation. The true facts were completely covered up and kept from the American public. The date was June the 2nd, 1921. The place, Tulsa, Oklahoma. After the bombing, the Tulsa World headlined read, "Dead, estimated at 100. City, quiet." One of the bloodiest race riots in the nation's non-military history had begun. The spark for the tinder was ignited on Monday, May 30th, 1921. Here's the story.
I know a place that was sure to go. Now moving slow, nowhere to go. The fall for every righteous cause for our life. Oh, we had it all, we paid the cost, countless lives that we loved for our life. Oh, life won't free.
During the early 1900s, Archer Street was intentionally designed to divide the city's north from the south side of Tulsa. Blacks were forced to remain on the north side, and whites enjoyed their separatism on the south side. Laws were passed to make sure that whites and blacks remained separated.
Anybody who wishes for the good old days probably doesn't remember what the good old days were really like. Because in 1921, the nation suffered from coast to coast from hate, and discrimination, and arrogance. And those were probably the underlying reasons. They manifested themselves in organizations like the Ku Klux Klan. But you can't blame the riot on one or two or three specific incidents. The environment is what caused it. You have to keep in mind that in 1921, the majority of the Oklahoma legislature were Klansmen. Almost every city and county official in Tulsa County, Oklahoma, was elected with either support of the Klan or they were Klansmen themselves. In those days, the Klan would have parades in downtown Tulsa, wearing their white sheets and their pointy little hats to fit their pointy little heads, that would last 4 to 5 hours in length. Now visualize the number of people that were involved in a parade that would last 4 to 5 hours. And all these people came from Tulsa. When you had a parade in Tulsa, a lot of people come in from other counties. But you also have to remember that 1925, there were 5 million card-carrying Ku Klux Klansmen in this country. So what was going on in Tulsa was probably the same thing that was going on in an awful lot of other cities. And if the riot hadn't happened in Tulsa, it probably would have happened someplace else. The difference between Tulsa and some other city is that we know how bad it got and where we've gone since then has been a mark of our progress.
As I sit here, I wonder, with blacks fighting for equal rights and integration in other parts of the United States at that time, was it really a good idea for blacks living in Greenwood to integrate?
But what happened by 1921 was not so much what happened on the black side, but what happened on the white side of the city. Because you had a lot of veterans coming back from Belleau Wood and Chateau Thierry and the Argonne Forest, and they couldn't find jobs. And a lot of these were white, uneducated, lower economic class folks. And when they came back to Tulsa, the Klan milked that resentment that they held for those black, prosperous businessmen. And the Klan did the same to them that the Nazis did in Germany in 1933. As a matter of fact, it's kind of interesting. You can make an analogy here that is historically profound. We had a microcosmic experience with the Nazis. The Nazis in Germany in 1933 blamed the Jews, and they persecuted the Jews, and they segregated the Jews, and they created ghettos for the Jews. And that's how they built their power, but they built their power on the disenfranchised and the disenchanted Germans. Well, the Nazis took over an entire country. The Ku Klux Klan, in this case, largely took over an entire city. And for that matter, to some degree, the entire state and maybe the region of the country in which they were strong. But they played on the hate and the fear and the envy and the jealousy of many of these whites who had felt that the country owed them something because they had fought in World War I. And here you have blacks who possibly didn't fight in World War I and were very prosperous. And you had the seeds for that kind of conflict economically. Now socially, you had a different situation. Oklahoma is a very unique state in the sense that it's the only state in the Union that was settled the way it was. This was Indian territory. It wasn't even a southern state in the Civil War. For that matter, it wasn't even a northern state. It was a state that was fought over by both sides. In fact, there were 69 battles fought in Oklahoma, largely between northern and southern Indians. But when the state was settled, it was settled by land runs. Benjamin Harrison opened up chunks of the state, and people just ran over this land and plotted out their portions. Now, why is that significant in terms of the riot? It's significant because an awful lot of those folks that made those land runs were Southerners whose farms and lands and plantations had been burned by Sherman and the Union Army when they went through the South. They had no homes left, so they came west. And when they made those land runs, they brought in Southern culture with them. As a result, what you have here in Oklahoma is a microcosm of the United States. The northern half of the state is more metropolitan. In fact,